Who was Empedocles? Empedocles was born circa 490 BCE. He was born in Acragas, Sicily, Greece, now Agrigento, Sicily, Greece. He died circa 430 BCE. Empedocles was a pre-Socratic philosopher, considered a member of the poorly defined pluralist school of pre-Socratic philosophers who attempted to reconcile Parmenides' rejection of change with the apparently changing world of sense experience, in that he was eclectic in his thinking and combined much that had been suggested by others. This group of philosophers is called pluralists because they differed from the monists in that they believed reality could not be reduced to one thing. Empedocles was educated by the Pythagoreans, who taught him that, on an intellectual level, numbers are the most important thing in the universe. All things could be reduced to numbers, which offered the perfect way of understanding the universe. Empedocles was the first pluralist in Greek philosophy. He was an enigmatic figure with multiple faces as a poet, medical doctor, preacher, mystic, magician, prophet, and a political leader as well as a philosopher. He was a popular politician and champion of democracy and equality. He began his political career with the prosecution of 2 state officials for their arrogant behavior towards foreign guests, which was seen as a sign of incipient tyrannical tendencies, and is credited with activities against other anti-democratic citizens. He continued his father's democratic tradition by helping to overthrow the succeeding oligarchic government and instituting a democracy at Acragas. At one point, he was offered effective rule of the city, but he declined. He was a brilliant orator. Aristotle credited him with the invention of rhetoric itself, and his knowledge of natural phenomena and medical conditions earned him the reputation of marvelous, even magical, powers. Empedocles himself apparently did little to dispel such ideas, and he is reported as claiming seemingly godlike powers, including the ability to revive the dead and to control the winds and rains, and as claiming to be a daemon, a divine, or potentially divine, being. Empedocles is also credited with other prescient ideas, such as that light travels with a finite velocity, a form of the law of conservation of energy and a theory of constant proportions in chemical reactions. These theories, arrived at simply through reasoning, rather than through any experimental evidence, of course, had little influence on the development of science, stated as they were within an insufficient theoretical framework, but in retrospect were remarkably prophetic. Empedocles is considered the last Greek philosopher to write in an epic verse, and the surviving fragments of his teaching are from his 2 poems, Purifications and On Nature. His major work, On Nature, and possibly parts of a second work, Purifications, written in hexameter verse, exists in more than 150 fragments. He presented his doctrines in the traditional poetic medium of hexameter verse. He is best known as the originator of the cosmogenic theory of the 4 classical elements of the ancient world. Empedocles devised the theory that all substances are made of 4 pure, indestructible elements: earth, air, fire, and water. In one of Empedocles' fragments, it is written thus: "Hear first the 4 roots of all things, shining Zeus, identified as fire, and life-bringing Hera, identified as air, and Adoneus, identified as earth, and Nestes, identified as water." Empedocles called these 4 elements roots, which he identified with the mythical names. His 4 elements actually represented an increase in the number of fundamental substances. Thales, the first scientist in ancient Greece, and quite possibly the world, had proposed about 100 years earlier that a single element, water, made everything. Then a relatively unknown philosopher by the name of Anaximenes proposed air, not water, was the basic stuff of the universe. Finally, yet another philosopher, Heraclitus, said fire was actually the true substance all others were made of. Empedocles probably could not square the idea of a single element world with his own observations, and therefore he increased the number of elements. He described air, fire, water, and earth as the 4-fold root of all things. Empedocles never used the term element, which seems to have been first used by Plato. According to the different proportions in which these 4 indestructible and unchangeable elements are combined with each other, the difference of the structure is produced. He believed everything in the universe was made of 4 elements, including living organisms. He also believed all matter, whether alive or not, was conscious. Empedocles explained diversity and changes of the world. For him, each element maintains its own nature without change, and the degree and ratio of the mixture of the 4 elements produce diversity. These 4 elements, however, do not intrinsically possess the principle of change. Empedocles introduced love, phi iota lambda tau eta / philia, and hate, nu epsilon kappa omicron / neokos, as the principal causes of both combination and separation in all things in the world. Love combines and hate separates. He believed matter was held together by a fundamental force of the universe he described as love and pushed apart by another force, strife. Love is responsible for the attraction of different forms of what we now call matter, and strife is the cause of their separation. If the 4 elements make up the universe, then love and strife explain their variation and harmony. Love and strife are attractive and repulsive forces, respectively, which are plainly observable in human behavior, but also pervade the universe. The 2 forces wax and wane in their dominance, but neither force ever wholly escapes the imposition of the other. Love is said to be equal in length and breadth to the others, and strife is described as equal to each of them in weight. These physical speculations were part of a history of the universe which also dealt with the origin and development of life. Empedocles developed a cyclical cosmology based upon the principle of love and hate. The world regularly repeats 4 periods. The first period, love dominates, the world is unified, everything is one, there is no separation, symbolized by sphere. 2. The second period, hate intrudes into the world and coexists with love, the unity of the world is broken, elements are separated and the world is diversified. 3. The third period, hate becomes dominant, the world becomes chaotic and more diversified. 4. The fourth period, love becomes dominant again, unity and harmony are restored, the world is restored to a perfection symbolized by sphere. The world repeats a cycle of 4 epochs again and again as a natural process, like the 4 seasons. The efforts of human beings have no effect upon this process. At the 4th stage, the variety of things in the world we have today is born. The elements existed together in their purity, without mixture and separation, and the uniting power of love predominated in the sphere, the separating power of strife guarded the extreme edges of the sphere. The sphere of Empedocles, being the embodiment of pure existence, is the embodiment or representative of God. The on nature was given all the physical, cosmological, and biological fragments, while to the purifications were attributed the teachings on reincarnation and religious reform. His major work, On Nature, and possibly parts of a second work, Purifications, written in hexameter verse, exists in more than 150 fragments. On Nature is a bold and ambitious work. On Nature contains an ontology of matter, barring complete destruction or generation, and a cosmogony, motivated by the aggregation and separation of Empedocles' 4 basic elements through the power of love and strife. Following this, the poem passes to zoogony and biology, as well as reflections on cognition and perception. Cosmogony is due to the interplay of the 4 roots and the 2 forces. Empedocles attempted to explain the separation of elements, the formation of earth and sea, of sun and moon, of atmosphere. Love asserts her influence, forming the cosmos, consisting of a world order with continental land masses, oceans, rivers, winds, sun, moon, seasons, planets, stars, etc. From the mixture of roots in due proportions, there arise various forms of animal life. Ultimately, both animals and cosmos perish as love totally reunifies the roots. Empedocles was the first person in history to propose that today's life on Earth arose from a process we could describe as natural selection. The interplay of forces and roots also explains the coming to be and destruction of animals. He also dealt with the first origin of plants and animals, and with the physiology of humans. As the elements entered into combinations, there appeared strange results: heads without necks, arms without shoulders. Then as these fragmentary structures met, there were seen horned heads on human bodies, bodies of oxen with human heads, and figures of double sex. But most of these products of natural forces disappeared as suddenly as they arose. Only in those rare cases where the parts were found to be adapted to each other did the complex structures last. Soon various influences reduced creatures of double sex to a male and a female, and the world was replenished with organic life. Empedocles is credited with the first comprehensive theory of light and vision. He put forward the idea that we see objects because light streams out of our eyes and touches them. This became the fundamental basis on which later Greek philosophers and mathematicians like Euclid would construct some of the most important theories of light, vision, and optics. Knowledge is explained by the principle that elements in the things outside us are perceived by the corresponding elements in ourselves. Empedocles noted the limitation and narrowness of human perceptions. We see only a part but fancy that we have grasped the whole. But the senses cannot lead to truth. Thought and reflection must look at the thing from every side. Like Pythagoras, Empedocles believed in the transmigration of the soul/metempsychosis, that souls can be reincarnated between humans, animals, and even plants. For Empedocles, all living things were on the same spiritual plane. Plants and animals are links in a chain where humans are a link too. Empedocles was a vegetarian and advocated vegetarianism, since the bodies of animals are the dwelling places of punished souls. Wise people, who have learned the secret of life, are next to the divine, and their souls, free from the cycle of reincarnations, are able to rest in happiness for eternity. The title of Empedocles' hexameter poem, Purifications, is not likely to be original. Still, the title provides a valuable guide to its contents. Purification or cleansing, kappa alpha theta alpha rho mu, could be performed both prior to pollution, to ward it off, and after it was incurred, to dissolve its power. Ritual and symbolic washing with water or blood were lustral, as was abstinence from select harmful practices. The purifications were attributed the teachings on reincarnation and religious reform. Empedocles declares his divinity and his powers of prophecy and healing to his fellow citizens. In what follows, the fragments of the purifications disclose an ancient decree and an oracle of necessity of transmigration for fallen demons, spirits, as punishment for their alliance with strife through bloodshed and perjury. After becoming polluted, the daemon is successively rejected by the elements and banished from the divine for 30,000 seasons. Empedocles reveals that he too is a participant in this cosmic peripatetic. Incarnation has the potential to expiate the crime of the daemon, and by moving through a series of lives as plants, animals, and finally, humans, he returns to the banquets of the gods. But in order to achieve this enlightened state, the daemon must adhere to a rigid ethical program, refusing meat, beans, and the bay leaf, and heterosexual sex as well. These injunctions constitute a radical indictment of traditional Greek religion. Transmigration is central to the philosophical program of the purifications. One part of the cycle begins under the total domination of love through the sphere, with strife exiled from the four roots. After these have become blended, strife leaps into action, becoming the motivator of the pollution by those gods who perjure a sacred decree governed by necessity. This triggers a chain reaction of banishment and wandering for the newly fallen demons in a fragment traditionally taken as part of the purifications. Transmigration as part of the ritual of purification mandates partaking in a world of suffering in which all life is fated to be born, become corrupt, and die. This reasserts the doctrine in On Nature that all things are mortal except for the four roots and love and strife, which combine and break down matter. Empedocles narrates his own dissolutions and recombination. There were once spirits who lived in a state of bliss, but having committed a crime, the nature of which is unknown, they were punished by being forced to become mortal beings, reincarnated from body to body. Humans, animals, and even plants are such spirits. The moral conduct recommended in the poem may allow us to become like gods again. The prominence of the divine is made clear in the fragments of the purifications. Empedocles' gods include the four elements Zeus, Hera, Adonis, and Nestes, and the two powers, love and strife. Refutation of all heresies 7.29. Each plays a crucial role in the cycle of transmigration outlined in the poem. Strife governs the exile of the daemon, the elements hate and successively reject it, and the worship of love creates the conditions for the daemon's restoration. This restoration to godhood further expands the pantheon to include gods who enjoy a shared hearth and banqueting, the absence of human misery, and freedom from destruction. They are subject to the divine oracle of necessity mandating against bloodshed, and they fall into the cycle of transmigration after forswearing it, becoming demons like Empedocles. Demons constitute a subcategory of gods who have received as lot a long life, and by qualifying their immortality, Empedocles adapts their traditional association with fate and a protecting spirit for humans. Presumably, unlike the roots in love and strife, these long-lived gods will be subject to dissolution under the total reigns of love or strife. Demons occupy transient forms, incarnating into plant life, animals, and humans. Empedocles relates that they wander in these for 30,000 seasons. In Purifications, Empedocles claimed that he is a god with thousands of followers, I, an immortal god, no more immortal, so honored by all, go about among you. I am praised by men and women, and followed by thousands who ask for deliverance. Empedocles believed our senses do not reveal the whole world to us. There are things out there that our limited senses do not allow us to observe. He was, with commendable wisdom, simply expressing a general principle. Empedocles of Acragas formulated a philosophical program in hexameter verse that pioneered the influential four-part theory of roots, air, water, earth, and fire, along with two active principles of love and strife, which influenced later philosophy, medicine, mysticism, cosmology, and religion. Empedocles has occupied a significant position in the history of pre-Socratic philosophy as a figure moving between mythos and logos, religion, and science. He is perhaps best known as the originator of the cosmogenic theory of the four classical elements of the ancient world: earth, air, fire, and water, which became the standard dogma for much of the next 2,000 years. He is also credited with several prescient ideas in physics which have since proved quite prophetic. Some doctors and experts say that it is impossible for anyone to know medicine who does not know what a human being is. But what they are talking about belongs to philosophy, like Empedocles and other people who have written about nature, what a human being is from the beginning, how he came about at first, and what things he is constituted of. Aristotle was similarly influenced by him. He mentions no philosopher with greater frequency except Plato. His critiques range from Empedocles' treatment of the generation of elements to the problems of love and strife as motive principles, to the motionlessness of the earth, to the growth of plants and animals, to the generation of animal organisms. Empedocles' interpretations of sight, sound, smell, and thought. His four elements theory proved to be remarkably long-lived. About a century after Empedocles devised it, Aristotle popularized and added to it. Empedocles' four elements came to be known as the Aristotelian elements. Blessed is he who has acquired a wealth of divine wisdom, but miserable is he in whom there rests a dim opinion concerning the gods. At one time through love all things come together into one, at another time through strife's hatred, they are born each of them apart. No mortal thing has a beginning, nor does it end in death and obliteration. There is only a mixing and then separating of what was mixed, but by mortal men these processes are named beginnings.